The United States has a thing for straight line state borders, with Hawaii being the sole exception for reasons that are quite apparent. To the west of the Mississippi River, states tend to be larger, more sparsely populated, and characterized by boxier shapes compared to those in the eastern part of the country. And from a distant perspective, these states appear to be composed entirely of straight lines. However, upon closer inspection, one can discern the uniquely shaped borders. Interestingly, the state of New Mexico nearly achieves the distinction of having exclusively straight line borders. There's a brief segment north of El Paso that would have spanned just 15 miles if it were straight rather than wavy. Actually, there are only 3 states with borders entirely composed of straight lines, devoid of natural features: Utah, which would have formed a rectangle if not for Wyoming's encroachment into its northeastern corner, Wyoming itself, and Colorado. However, Colorado's borders aren't perfectly straight due to 2 distinct reasons: the curvature of the earth and errors made by 19th century surveyors tasked with creating state boundaries. In 1861, the United States Congress established the boundaries of the newly created territory of Colorado, using lines of latitude and longitude. These lines extended from these 2 latitudes and these 2 longitudes. While lines of latitude run parallel to each other in circles that do not intersect, lines of longitude converge at the poles. As a result, Colorado's longitudinal borders are slightly wider apart in the south, and the state's shape resembles that of an isosceles trapezoid rather than a perfect rectangle. Thus, the northern Colorado border is about 22 miles shorter than its southern counterpart, a characteristic shared with neighbouring Wyoming. However, this discrepancy is not the end of the story, and it leads us to consider 2 important terms: boundary delimitation, which refers to the definition of the boundary in a treaty, judgment, or other agreement, and boundary demarcation, which involves physically marking the boundary on the ground. The United States Congress passed an enabling act on March 3, 1875, outlining the requirements for the territory of Colorado to achieve statehood. Later, on August 1, 1876, just 4 weeks after the United States centennial celebration, US President Ulysses S. Grant signed Proclamation 230, officially admitting Colorado to the Union as a 38th state, earning it the nickname the Centennial State. It wasn't until 1879 that the first boundary survey team undertook the task of transforming Congress's abstract into physical boundary markers. Surprisingly, the official border would be determined not by the delimited boundary, but by the demarcated one. Unfortunately, 19th century surveys were limited by the absence of satellites and other high precision measurement tools. However, it's important to acknowledge the immense challenge they faced and the constraints of the era. Despite these limitations, they accomplished a remarkable feat, navigating through challenging terrains and often hostile environments to stake out the border of Colorado. Nonetheless, errors were inevitable, and they were quite common, with numerous significant errors in the surveying process, particularly the disparities between Congress's defined boundaries and the surveyors' marked borders. Located in a remote arid expanse of the desert, the Four Corners Monument stands as a significant landmark in the southwestern United States, marking the quadrupoint where the states of Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, and Utah converge. However, lingering uncertainty surrounds the monument's proximity to its intended position. Given the historical ambiguity surrounding the borders of Colorado, there exists a notable variance between the monument's actual placement, known with considerable precision, and our understanding of its intended location. Contrary to the reported 2.5-mile discrepancy widely reported in news outlets, the actual offset amounts to approximately 1,800 feet or less. In 1879, a survey team embarked on a northward journey from the Four Corners, placing markers at every mile along the way. However, upon reaching the Wyoming border, they discovered they had not arrived at the anticipated location. Subsequent surveys conducted in 1885 and 1893 pinpointed the errors made by the original surveyors. Nevertheless, by that time, the surveyed border had been officially recognized, and altering it would have necessitated mutual agreement between Colorado and Utah, along with congressional approval. The most significant discrepancy occurred just south of the road connecting LaSalle, Utah to Paradox, Colorado. Over an 8-mile stretch, the surveys veered westward before correcting their course to true north, resulting in a deviation of 3,860 feet. Moving from west to east, the border between Colorado and New Mexico initially follows a relatively straight trajectory. However, east of Edith, there's a noticeable deviation as the border veers southeast for approximately 3,400 feet before returning to its eastward path. This slight adjustment moves the border 2,820 feet further south than its previous position. The reason for this deviation appears to be a concession to the terrain's topography. The deviation aligns with a small valley oriented in a northwest-southeast direction. Towards the conclusion of their surveying expedition, it appears the survey party encountered another deviation. In the final 52.8 miles before the border turns north, where Colorado runs alongside Oklahoma, the borderline once again veers south by as much as 1,771.6 feet. Together, these represent just 4 of the most significant and easily identifiable surveying errors. Overall, Colorado's borders exhibit numerous twists and turns, with many being much smaller than the aforementioned discrepancies. Thus, Colorado cannot be described simply as having having 4 sides. After 162 years of governmental surveys, the border of Colorado was officially delineated by 697 boundary markers and 697 straight boundary lines. Therefore, if Colorado is not a rectangle, what geometric shape is it? Well, it's not a pentagon, hexagon, or heptagon, but rather a
hexahectanecantachaheptagon,
or a 697-sided polygon. This hasn't made jack, and if you're watching from Colorado, please leave a comment down below.